Welcome back to Trending in Education. Dan Strafford, Mike Palmer with you. A very special episode as we talk to Russell Glass, co-author of Voting with a Porpoise. We'll get into that momentarily. Want to check in with Mike. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about marine mammals. Any opportunity to talk children's literature, marine mammals, and civics. I'm in. So yeah, I'm really excited that we were able to get Russell as a guest.
And Russell joins us now. Russell, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, thanks. Like it was already said, excited to talk about marine mammals and civics, as you can imagine.
Can you give us a little bit of your background? Just give our listeners an idea of where you're coming to this children's book. Voting with a Porpoise is available on Amazon and where you can buy children's books. And we'll talk into the civics of it all and the purpose behind it. But your background a little bit for our listeners so we can jump off from there.
Yeah, kind of a funny way to get to a children's book author, but I'm a multiple-time entrepreneur. I graduated from Duke University and went right into technology, a company called Trilogy Software, and it's a very entrepreneurial company down in Austin, Texas. Have founded or been a part of, I guess now 5 founding teams. And last company I sold to LinkedIn after founding it and building it up over about 6 years or so, and ran the marketing solutions division of LinkedIn. Had a great time, went through the whole acquisition of Microsoft, by Microsoft of LinkedIn. It was a ton of fun, great experience. Took a bunch of time off after that just to be dad. I have 3 small kids, and during that process, it was sort of the Trump election. I had concerns about the way the government was running, and I started to think about what I could do, what talents I had, as small as they might be, to try to change the culture around voting. And that's what led to a number of activities, including writing Voting with a Porpoise.
So it's an inspirational story on a number of fronts, but it does also seem like this is a trend around authoring books in support of not-for-profits or causes. Can you talk a little bit about that too? Because this is really in support. The content itself is helping parents talk to their kids about the importance of voting and civics and some of these other things, but also the proceeds are ultimately in support of that cause as well.
Yeah, no, that's right. So the idea here wasn't to make any kind of profit. The thought was, hey, if we can make some money on this, that's a great additional way to support, nonprofit voting related causes, right? How do we increase the voting rate of the country? And the reason for the book, the reason for targeting children at this age, there are multiple reasons for it. One is, when I looked at what was wrong with the country, I actually honed in on low voting rates as being a huge part of the problem we face. Because if you have, let's just use a hypothetical. If you had 100% of people in the country voting, money in politics kind of goes away, because money is basically, in effect, buying votes today. You have a little bit of influence, but mostly it's just getting people to show up for your candidates. 2 is, all of a sudden, you have a democracy that truly works, because the majority of people that vote for something will win. Today, a small fraction of the active population actually decides what's best for the rest of the country, because our voting rates are so low. And so in thinking through all that, I had a number of strategies on how to drive voting rates up. One of them, I joined the board of Rock the Vote, because I think they're doing a great job with youth voting and focusing on the millennial and under voting population. But there's still a narrative problem. There's still people don't feel civically involved. Mm-hmm. And I felt like starting younger, giving some education to kids when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and getting them excited about, hey, why do we vote? Why is voting important as a society, right? How do we make good decisions as a society? If we start them younger and they're thinking that way, they're going to be excited to vote when they're eligible. Mm-hmm. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, for sure. And also I imagine as a serial entrepreneur, you've been able to sort of make things happen from zero to success. How did that inform writing this book, and how is writing a children's book similar or different from launching a small business or a big business?
Yeah, great question. I think in all candor, I think part of it is I don't have that it's impossible to do sort of gene, right? So I think as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of suspending of disbelief, right? You have to kind of plow through all of that. The odds are against you. You have to plow through the pessimism, and you just keep going. And and if you're lucky, if you have some bounces that go your way, to use a March Madness analogy, you can be very successful in changing the world in some way. And I think so that's one, is that as an entrepreneur, you just believe it can happen. And the notion that we'll get one of these books in every single library and every single classroom in the country, on the face of it, is crazy. But you start with a book, you start with a concept, and then you just keep doing things like podcasts, and maybe eventually you get there.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I definitely want, we talk a lot, we're a learning podcast. We talk a lot about how people learn, how that's changing. We also talk a ton about the importance of narrative and good storytelling to great teaching. Can you talk a little bit about the narrative, like the story itself, and how you kind of you got there? Because like I said, you had me at marine mammals, but I'd love to hear a little more around just a high level how you landed on this particular structure to kind of like address the topics you're interested in.
Sure. Yeah. The notion of, so I think you make a great point. The notion of narrative, it's actually the only thing that ever really does change culture. We are a storytelling machine, and that's how for all of our evolution we learn. And so telling stories, telling narratives, as companies like Coke know well, that's how you capture people emotionally, and that's how you change their sort of preferences and notions of what's good and bad and all that good stuff. So the idea here was, all right, how do we tell a story that'll resonate with children about how society makes decisions? And we knew we didn't want to get it too complex. We knew that it had to be pretty straightforward. But if we could create the old, arc of stories where someone's facing a big problem, they, have things that happen to them during that problem that create suspense. They come together and figure out how to solve the problem, and at the end of the day, they win. Well, how is voting the solution to that problem, and creates this great win? And actually, the idea was that we would use jungle animals originally, and mostly because I'm a complete novice when it comes to writing children's books. Sean, a co-author who has written a number of children's books, he's like, marine mammals. Everybody loves marine mammals. There's a ton of colors, they're fun, let's do marine mammals. And so he kind of reworked that into a marine mammal story. And then finally, probably because I've got 3 kids under 10, and when I'm reading to them, I love rhymes. I always reach for the rhyming books, the Dr. Seuss books, The Bear Snores On is like my favorite book of all time, if you've never read it. And so I was like, I'm going to turn this into a rhyme. And that really brings you to a younger audience as well, because you can read a book to a 2-year-old that doesn't really totally connect, but they love the rhymes.
I know Dan's going to get in there, but that immediately is taking me, you drop some beats below it, and you get the podcast booth going, and next thing you know, you're spitting fire. But I'll let Dan's got a question. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I think the turn towards the sea life gave us voting with a porpoise, which I said before we started recording, I struggle. I want to say poipus every time, which is fun in and of itself. And as you went through the process of writing this book and getting it to the editors and then going to print and getting it out to in people's hands, did you ever stop and think of, well, this is a really weighty topic. We've been able to get down to this pretty, accessible story and take a step back and realize you have other topics in there as well. There may be some global warming talk in there. There's obviously the porpoise and the dolphins working together across, groups a little bit, friendships and that. Like, did you ever take that moment to look at how you were able to take such a weighty topic and drill it down to be accessible to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds?
Yeah, it's funny. At first, no, I didn't really think about that at all. I was just thinking about, is this the right meter? And my wife hates near rhymes. So she was kind of like my editor that forced me into no near rhymes. So you've got this great meter, you've got this great rhyming texture. And I didn't really, I knew the story was important. I knew that it covered some topics, but I didn't think about it. And then I think a reviewer was kind of like, wow, there's a lot covered in this, 10 couplet or whatever it is, 10 quartet, whatever, story. There's a lot here. There's a lot of meat here to talk about. And then as I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I guess we did sneak kind of a lot of stuff in here that, you can talk through with kids. And then we decided to kind of write little lesson plans to help parents and teachers think about how to talk about this with children. And we captured some of those things in the lesson plans. There's a lot there. There's a lot of meat.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how much research you did, or how aware you are of how early civics and citizenship lesson planning begins, because I imagine in some ways you're filling a bit of a gap, particularly if you're providing the lesson plans for educators. But is this something that is this part of a broader movement? Are you because you're involved in other causes, Rock the Vote, et cetera. Is this an increasing trend that you guys are a part of? How much are you blazing the field, and how much is this part of a bigger trend?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people thinking about this in the high school world. There's a number of organizations that have started to move into that world, including Rock the Vote, actually building civics kind of courseware that high schools can teach, which is hugely effective. Minnesota, which is one of the highest voting rate states in the country, has terrific curriculum around voting. And they just have a culture of voting there that starts with high schools use the real actual voting booths to vote for their own internal sort of political structures, so president of the class and whatnot. So it starts really early there, and I think that's just brilliant, right? It demystifies it for the high school students. We haven't seen that much at this earlier formative age. Part of what gave me the idea to do it, though, is my kids go to a play-based nursery school, and there's a lot of research that shows that play-based nursery schools, lead to great ability to socialize, and that leads to success over time. But one of the things they do there is they have these little elections. They have these little votes, and so kids can vote on snack, and they teach them about, okay, well, majority wins, right? And then I started thinking about my own children, where at age 0, they understand the concept of fairness. Immediately, they come out of the womb and their older sister gets more strawberries than them. And this little 3-month-old is like, and they start freaking out because they have less strawberries. And so at 0, you can teach kids about fairness. And voting is all about fairness. It's all about kids, or it's all about society. How do you decide on an issue when you're millions and millions of people, right? That's it. That's what it comes down to.
It's been many a time in my house with 3 daughters myself where that's not fair echoes through the hallways as the 6-year-old's chasing the 9-year-old.
Literally 15 minutes ago, I just went through an apple fairness issue.
And it doesn't stop. It keeps building to, jewelry and clothing and as it goes on and on. As you talked about building a curriculum around this, at least a small curriculum, what's the goal here? Is this every classroom, every library? Is it getting it in the hands of parents directly, teachers directly? What's sort of the broad scope of what you're trying to do with the book and the curriculum you've created?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's every classroom, every library. Give teachers on and around election times of year. It happens every year. It happens at different times of year, depending on the state you're in. Give them the ability to read a fun story to the kids and open up this discussion topic in a way that even 3-year-olds can absorb, right? And I think that the ages for this are probably 3 to 9. I think 10, 11, 12 may start to feel some of this gets a little on the cornier side, but I think like even my 10-year-old loves it, and I've seen others. So I think that is probably the appropriate age range, and it just gives you a great way as an educator or as a parent to have these conversations.
And you have a lot of background in technology. We're on this is a digital format. This is audio format. Have you thought about how this type of content might translate into digital formats? Because another thing we've talked about a lot is the movement away from screens around education and the idea of, reading to your kids and try to encourage sort of traditional reading from a book as like almost like a new movement. So I definitely understand beginning with a children's book. But do you have any thoughts about how some of this content might translate into digital formats?
So we released it in both Kindle format as well as, handheld or whatever we call books now.
Right.
And I really did that mostly because it reduces the expense of distribution. So we can get it to more people, and those who can't afford to buy a book, they can get it. I mean, if you have Prime, you can get it for free on Kindle. Mm-hmm. And so that was the notion around that. And the colors are so vibrant and bright. It actually, it turns into a digital format very nicely. Mm-hmm. I think that as a household that, we have a couple of iPads for the kids that are like locked away right now because we felt like they were using them too much. Mm-hmm. I do think it's important that you pick up books and you flip the pages and and again, the studies have shown that kids absorb more if you read to them from a book for whatever reason. I don't think people totally understand why right now that is the case, but flipping a book and allowing them to absorb whatever they decide to absorb. It's actually an interesting experiment. If you watch a kid read a book or you read a book to a kid, watch their eyes. And you'll be surprised where their eyes are going. It's rarely where you'd think their eyes should be going. They're kind of all over the place. You're reading to them, but they're looking at a piece or a picture, or they're zoning in on something that is caught their attention. And I think that's part of it. It's this notion of exploration that they can do while you're reading to them that is a little, it's less easy on a smaller screen. They don't see quite the depth. I don't know but that's what it feels like to me. Mm-hmm. And this book, if you experience the book, there's so much going on from a picture standpoint. Again, this marine life thing, and it's mixed media. So you get this picture effect in the background. You get these wonderful, adorable creatures in the foreground, and they're doing all kinds of fun stuff. So kids can really kind of get absorbed in that.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the learning science concepts we talk a lot about on the show is the picture superiority effect, which is, when you pair images with text or audio, it increases the retention by like 60%. So like, it's funny, we almost forget that when we start teaching older folks the power of images. And then when Dan and I we're talking about maybe doing a show on memes soon because memes are hot now because the European Union's trying to crack down on them. Right. But just like the power of
spitting in the subway, and all of a sudden there's this huge spitting epidemic.
Exactly. But like what was it like thinking about authoring not just the story and the copy, but also working with an illustrator and actually doing that aspect of of the design. I imagine it helps really, trigger the imagination and resonate with this audience. But what was it like, as somebody working in the creative process, trying to understand how visual kind of helps with the narrative?
Yeah. So again, first children's book for me. So it was both enlightening as well as a ton of fun. And we're super lucky to our illustrator, a guy named Daniel Howarth, has worked with Sean in the past and is just supremely talented. So, his ability to take this story and bring it to life. He starts with just wireframe. Well, I call them wireframes as a tech guy. I don't know if that's actually what they're called, but he starts with just sketches. But even those simple sketches, you can see him capturing emotion in the faces of these animals, right? These dolphins and crabs, and that to me originally was like, oh wow, the amount that you can compress into. It takes a whole bunch of language. In a children's book, you actually have less language to work with, but it takes a whole bunch of language even then to get a concept across that he can capture with just like a flick of a pen. And an eyebrow being furrowed, or a half smile. So just super talented. And then we would work with him on those sketches and kind of adjust things. And then he used this mixed media concept, which I thought really brought this to life, this notion of photographic background for the ocean, and you see the light filtering through. And so it feels authentic, even though it's a bunch of cartoon animals, right? Really. But it feels real. It feels like there's immense amount of depth, I think is the right word. There's a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, I think Dan might have a couple more questions. First off, just really excited that you're doing this type of work. Keep it up. Keep on distorting reality by not believing the pessimists. Just a sort of a fun question. What was the most interesting pair of rhymed words that made it into the book from your perspective?
That is a great question. There's a couplet in here that I don't know if it's the most interesting, but the one that I thought was the most fun, just in terms of how the story came together. And I'll pull it up here because I've got the book right in front of me.
Sure.
Let's see.
And feel free to recite. I've been known to recite poetry on this podcast. So like our listeners are, we've broken them in. So do what you feel.
I love that. Thank you. All right. So, Petey, why didn't you vote? You're one of us. He can't vote, said Finn. He's just a porpoise. So that notion of getting porpoise, which is it's kind of a complicated word, right?
Yeah.
It's old, weird. It has no real, tie to any other words. So being able to run that in the story, I thought was fun.
That's amazing. I think it's even got a diphthong in it. I think the OI. I'm not sure. We'll have to. We'll clean that up in post. But I'm pretty sure that.
Let me know.
Yeah.
Well, the question I have is, do we get to hear from Petey the Porpoise again? Is there a sequel with maybe a school of fish, or a group of whales? What is that? A gam? Is that gam of whales, or maybe even a school of whales? Any future plans for Petey to ride again?
Yeah, I actually think it's still a pod of whale. I think.
Okay.
We should double check that also when we're doing the diphthong research.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, the story was written with the notion that there would be others. And so I think our hope here is to stay focused on getting this one distributed. And if we can get, enough out there, absolutely, we will do more of them. And we actually have one guy reach out that says he wants to turn this into an animated series if we get there. So that could be fun too.
Well, and you mentioned the collective noun being a pod. This would lend itself to a podcast. So I just wanted to, boom.
There's got to be a joke in there somewhere. How do whales communicate across the world?
Group podcast.
There it is. So you can find that. Well, why don't you let us know here, Russell? Where can people find this book, and how can they get it in the hands of children, teachers, and parents alike?
Yeah, easiest way for people is Amazon.com. We also, for booksellers and distributors, we sell through Ingram. So super easy to get wholesale pricing through Ingram. And always love to hear from people, their comments on bookswithaporpoise.com.
There you go. Bookswithaporpoise.com. I made it through pronouncing porpoise correctly each time. I'm proud of myself for that fact. Russell Glass, co-author of Voting with a Porpoise. Thanks so much for the time. Find it on Amazon. Find it across the internet by going to bookswithaporpoise.com. Appreciate the time, Russell.
Thank you so much. Terrific to be here.
And as always, find us on Twitter at TrendingInEd. You can find us at trendingineducation.com, on Facebook at TrendingInEd. And share this episode and all our episodes with a friend, and share the book with a friend as well. Thanks so much for listening to Trending in Education.